We have Dennis Pike from Island. He is the Director of Technical Account Managers, who's going to kick us off with the keynote this morning. Dennis?
Great. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, good. All right. Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I really appreciate it. I'm Dennis Pike. I lead up our TAM org at Island. I actually live here in Chapel Hill. I started my tech career in 1995 repairing Dell and Apple PCs at Cavalier Computer to help pay for college when I was at the University of Virginia. And then I spent about 10 years in Silicon Valley working mostly on networking with Sprint and then with Extreme Networks. And then I moved here about 20 years ago. I transferred with Extreme, and I worked in, for anyone who's lived here for a while, I worked in one of those weird bunker-looking buildings that was an old Nortel building right next to the old IBM campus. So that's where we were doing a lot of our hardware development back when you weren't using Broadcom chips, you were making your own. I worked for a couple other security companies, and then my last role was I worked at Microsoft. I was the weirdest title I've ever had. I was a global black belt for advanced security analytics, and I was the liaison between the field and engineering in Herzliya in Israel on Sentinel, if anyone's familiar with Sentinel. So what Sentinel was in an incubation period for a couple years. And so I worked on Sentinel, and then 4.5 years ago, I started at Island. Who here has heard of Island, if you want to raise a hand? That's pretty good. Okay, cool. So 4.5 years ago, I started at Island. I was the 28th employee, and I was the first systems engineer, or now we call them solutions engineer. And then now we have over 600 employees. We have over 40 SEs. And about 2 years ago, I took over leadership of our TAM organization. So if anyone's worked with a TAM, for us, it's a post-sales dedicated technical resource. And the team is now, we have 20 TAMs globally and continue to grow that team. So mostly working with our team covers about 65% of our deployed user base. So it's a small number of accounts, but it's our largest customers. So anyway, it's really great to be here. Today, I'm going to be focused on compromised credentials. And so I'll kind of start with laying the groundwork specifically on compromised credentials, the effects on the industry, typical attack vectors, things like that. And then I'm going to pivot and spend most of my time. I am going to try to be not only talk about Island, I want to talk about the enterprise browser space in general, which if a good number of you have heard about Island, I think probably a good number of you have at least heard about enterprise browser. It's relatively new. So we were at the very beginning of it when we first went into stealth 5 years ago and then came out of stealth 3.5 years ago. So kind of talk about compromised credentials is a big issue. We'll kind of go through that. Enterprise browser is, with its new architecture, is an interesting way to help address that specific issue. I don't want you to walk away from this thinking that an enterprise browser only is used to prevent compromised credentials. That's not at all the case, but it's one interesting use case. Okay, so I'll start with kind of laying the groundwork on where we are with compromised credentials today. I don't think there's any real doubt in anyone's mind that compromised credentials is a big issue. Fun fact that while I was doing some research on this, the first computer credentials came out and were invented in 1961 at MIT for a shared user system so that individual users could not access each other's data. So we're now over 60 years in on having a compromised credential issue. The issue has continued to grow, and especially the monetary effects. And I'm sure like a lot of you, I don't read every word of the Verizon data breach incident report, the DBIR. It's a great, if anyone doesn't read it, it's a great read. It really does help you understand year over year what's going on with security. I think a lot of people's perception is that vulnerabilities, CVEs that are actively exposed are the way that most people are penetrating into systems and getting access to our company's data. But as you can, and this has been held true for years, the majority of access is actually through stolen credentials. And those credentials may be accessed using like an InfoSeCon, which it gets kind of fuzzy, but is a massive percentage of the attack space. Some of the things that I'll kind of cover off on, like when I was at Microsoft, anyone who worked in identity, and I'm sure anyone who works with Microsoft, which is probably most people in this room, they will talk endlessly about how you should be using MFA on everything, and it really does help reduce the overall risk level when you layer an MFA. Enterprise Browser does provide some interesting things in that area, so I'll talk about that. Phishing attacks aren't going anywhere, and certainly, like if anyone's messed around with, I'll go through a couple of tools that I use to mock up phishing because it's a real tool that real hackers use. But now, if you've ever used like Lovable or Cursor, I whip up demo sites if I'm testing something, and you can create an incredibly realistic site in minutes and deploy it. And it's amazing technology, but it has also not just helped people with good intentions. InfoSeCon also, so I'll kind of talk about that a little bit. Once someone gets a footprint into your machine, what are some mechanisms that the enterprise browser space can help address? And then also, there are various vendors who, and we've partnered with one, because when you're using an enterprise browser, you're logged in as I'll show you in a little bit. We're in a unique position to understand who's logging into what, and then when paired with dark web monitoring tools, you then have a very good understanding of what your overall exposure footprint is. And there's real dollars behind this. It is really a bummer that the FBI can't present today. I was really looking forward to those presentations, but they put together a great report every year, the Internet Crime Report, that gives us a very good idea of the financial impacts that these types of crimes have. And just to give you a scope, this one I find crazy, the entire North Korean IT workers camp. I don't know if that's affected anyone in the room, but there's been a big increase in the damage from this, where you have people who are applying for jobs saying that they're in the U.S., but they're actually not in the U.S., and they're faking where they are, and they're working remote. But even that is dwarfed by the effects of the compromised credentials. In this case, email compromise, which is really around phishing. Investment, where you're getting conned to give money to someone's business who isn't real, which is the most significant. Personal data breach, and also fake tech, so some tech support that's not actually really supporting you. But you can see in this grand scheme, I think, as we're reading our various different tech journals, in your mind, it's like, oh, this fake tech support has this massive impact, but as compared to what we're talking about today, it's actually just about half of it. All right, so specifically the vectors where we're commonly getting our credentials stolen that I'll go through. So and ways that enterprise browser can give a new and unique way of protecting against it. So phishing, SMS phishing, voice phishing, which if you've ever gotten one of those is incredibly creepy. Farming, which is really kind of like phishing, where you're hosting a large scale, like what I was talking about if you're developing a site with like Lovable and Cursor and whatnot, and putting it out there and somehow redirecting traffic to that in order to gather credentials. Also info stealers, so There's a lot of different weaknesses native within Chromium that I'll talk about. That there's a lot of protections that are in place with enterprise browsers in general. And then once you've taken these credentials, what are you going to do with them? You want to monetize that. That's commonly done in the dark web, which I'll also go through some types of ways that enterprise browser helps address that vector as well. So users are users. Users love to use weak passwords. They love to, I'm sure we've all been guilty, although would never admit having reused credentials. Extensions, another area that I'll talk about. Even with Manifest v3, like the Chromium project in general has really worked hard in order to try and limit down the scope of unsafe behavior that extensions can take within the browser. But the attack surface is still quite big, and really the defense mechanism is a user getting a pop-up saying, do you want to give all these permissions? And most users will say yes. We'll also talk about phishing. There's also the issue, browsers are a very personal thing. Everyone will talk about which one they like the best and why other ones are terrible. Across all various different browsers, you have different weaknesses in how passwords are stored. So if anyone's not aware, the Chromium password manager is really, really, really weak in the way that it stores passwords, and it is absolutely trivial to pull passwords out of Chromium. So if you go into your favorite search engine and what you'll see them commonly referred to is Chromium password recovery tools. So it sounds really nice, like, oh, you lost your passwords, like, let me help you recover them. But like with Nearsoft, with ChromePass and his other tools, it is extremely easy to get that data. Also within Chromium, there's various different data stores. So you have cookies, you have cache. There's actually a database within Chromium, which is what Chrome and Edge and the majority of browsers are based on today. There's also local storage. So there's all these different repositories where various different types of session data are stored, and they're stored in an insecure way. So if you have user level or admin level, depending on the store, you can easily get access to this data and do all types of session reuse, whether it's via cookie or some sort of other token that's referenced in the web page. You also have the content in the page itself. So if you go to any website, there'll be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of objects within the page. So I go to a website, there'll be hundreds of HTTP, put, post, gets, 200, 300, 400, 500 replies that come back. Those objects that you're gathering aren't all from that actual site. You'll have various different ad networks or other ways that you're delivering content in that are not under the control of that page. So a common mechanism for delivering info stealers as well. So there's a lot of things going on between the user and the browser where there's weaknesses that allow attackers to then get access to credentials. So now I'm going to move into a very dangerous world of demoing a bunch of stuff. So hopefully it all goes well. Everyone stay off the Wi-Fi, please. I need really good internet connectivity. So I'm going to go through ways that the enterprise browser can help with some of those issues that I just talked about. So for anyone who's not familiar with the enterprise browser space, it depends on who you ask, as always with anything in tech. It's been going for about 4 years. This year, we hit an so there's been a lot of coverage. If you have Gartner or Forrester research that you're subscribed to and have access to, there's been a lot of, starting with the typical cool vendor stuff that you see early on, and then various different levels of reports that go out. There's kind of 5 stages to the Magic Quadrant for Gartner in particular. With Enterprise Browser, we're kind of at stage 4. So if you're familiar with Gartner Peer Insights, or you're not familiar, it's kind of like the Yelp of IT tooling, where customers are reviewing products. And so you can go there and see what people think of the various different products in different spaces. And 2 years ago, enterprise browsers were covered in SASE. Last year, they were covered in DLP, which we do have DLP built into the product, and many vendors do, but like that's a feature, not the core thing. And then this year, they rolled out Secure Enterprise Browser, or SEB. So if you see SEB, this is where the analysts have now, and Forrester and other analysts have all started to kind of talk in this language. So it really has started to take hold with customers and in various different ways that we communicate within our industry. But at the core, what I think most enterprise browser vendors would have a similar kind of take. When we're doing work, 95% of the applications we're accessing are in a browser. And for most people, that's in a consumer browser. And the consumer browser, the way that it makes its money is that it harvests our personal data and it monetizes it through advertising. I am not going to judge that business model from an ethical perspective, but it does mean their focus, their business, because how your business makes money is how you focus. They are not focused on the security of your users accessing your most sensitive applications with your most sensitive data. So that's not their core focus. So as security practitioners and cybersecurity practitioners, what we've done is we've purchased endpoint agents, whether it's EDR, endpoint DLP. We've purchased network tooling, whether it's next-gen firewall or web proxies, cloud security, SASE, SSE, CASB, VDI, on and on with 3- and 4-letter acronyms, right? And we've kind of wrapped this consumer browser in all these tools in order to feel good about providing access to our most critical applications. The unfortunate side effect of that is that we've also really affected the end user experience, right? So you put all these toolings in, you have to either grab that traffic with a kernel level agent, you have to unnaturally motion that traffic to some sort of network tool. I have to somehow get it to a cloud service. I have to SSL decrypt it, which breaks like whatever percentage of your traffic, and anyone who's had to deal with that where you're putting in all kinds of exceptions, which is just then poking holes in your security. All these things, right? And the end user is the one who suffers from that. And you've also not even gotten the level of visibility that you want. So what's been really neat working at Island is that now we're working on this whole new architecture where just kind of backing away from all that and saying, okay, like if the user is accessing these applications via the browser, let's just put the policy engine in the browser itself. We don't need to steer it anywhere to then have access to it. So we've pulled all the unnecessary bits out of. So we're based on Chromium. I think most enterprise browser vendors are. We've pulled out the unnecessary bits as harvesting data that's vendor-specific auth systems and things like that, and then inserted inside a full-bore policy engine that gives you kind of firewall style, who going to what types of actions or controls do I want to put in place, how do I want to monitor how their applications are performing, what type of visibility how do I want to log that, and how do I want to send that over to my SOC analysts, and all these sorts of things. So taking all this tooling and putting it inside the browser itself. And so it is not to say, I don't think that any enterprise browser vendor would say they're out to take out every security tool that companies have. It's just a new, interesting architecture that allows you to approach whatever types of use cases you have in a way that is new and gives you, because the browser, enterprise browser, has complete and total access to the DOM, the page itself, everything going on in the browser, and Chromium actually has its own network stack, and so everything going on in that network stack, there's a lot of things you can do in policy that you have never been able to do before with typical security tools. So I'm going to go through 9 different ways that enterprise browser, and I would encourage you to go talk to all the enterprise browser vendors, and it is a new, interesting space. I'm for sure other vendors will have interesting things that they're doing that we're not, and vice versa. I should have said at the beginning, I love networking, so please come by. I would love to talk to anybody and talk about whatever it is you're working on, and vice versa. And if you want to come by and learn about Island, great. But I encourage you to go around and see. It is a fast-moving, interesting space with a lot of new, interesting solutions going on. So I'll go through 9 different areas. I think these are. I don't know that all vendors cover all these, but it is relatively common within the space. So first of all, and especially my last 5 years before I came to Island, I was working almost entirely on SIEM and SOC tools. So this may not seem like a huge deal, but if you're ever trying to work through an incident, knowing who's doing what is actually really, really, really important. And if in the enterprise browser, you have to be logged in. And 99% of our customers are integrated in with our IDP, whether it's Entra or Okta or Ping or whatever it is. And so you're getting all their user group and other attributes that you can then make policy decisions on, but it also gets logged. So you have end device posture data, all these things you have about the user that when you're trying to track down, like a typical SOC scenario is, user got a phishing email, what did they do, right? Did they click on the link? Did they then put in the username and password and hit submit? And I have to go remediate that device? Like I have to pull up CrowdStrike, and now this user is going to have a really bad day because they're not going to be able to do anything for a while. Or they're fine. Right, so having that level of detail in the logs is really important. So, for anyone who hasn't seen an enterprise browser, this is an enterprise browser. I'm clearly not a graphic artist, so sorry. I did my best, but clearly everything about it is brandable. I think this is also. There's different levels I think different vendors do here, but I've done my best to give the Triangle InfoSeCon a shout out, and obviously the background. This is all tied to identity though, so how, and I can have a bunch of different profiles here, but how I'm logged in policy dictates how this looks. So if I'm a contractor, I might have a different look and feel than someone who's in IT versus someone who's in whatever group. Or if I've had a merger and acquisition, I might have a different look and feel versus people who are on the company that did the acquiring. I did put some Easter eggs in here, so you may see some fun little. I have my little announcements here, so this is all customizable as well. The apps that people have access to. So this is an enterprise browser. At first glance, you probably thought I opened Chrome. It intentionally looks a lot like Chrome, so that users don't have to be trained or anything like that. People just know how to use a browser. All right, but the key point there is in order to get access to anything within here, I have to be logged into our identity system. So that's going to give you a level of attribution when you're trying to deal with compromised credentials, knowing I'm not trying to reverse map an IP surrogate to then go try and build out some table to figure out who that is, an Active Directory or something like that. They are logged in and 100% know that this is accurate. Okay. Malicious extension detection and prevention. This was not, people weren't really worried about this until last year, which I'm sure most people in the room are familiar with the Cyber Haven incident. So Cyberhaven, I think, really scared people pretty badly. Malicious actors got access to Cyberhaven's GitHub. They made additions to their extension code that was then siphoning up data and sending it out to command and control, and then pushed it out. And extensions update automatically. It's not like your iPhone where you have to go in and update every single day. Thanks, Apple. It just automatically updates, right? And so these systems just go out, grab the update, and now they're completely compromised. Thankfully, it was caught relatively quickly. But what you'll see a lot in the enterprise browser space is if anyone uses CASB and remembers when it first came out, you had this concept of shadow IT where, back when we were pivoting from data center, our own application servers, you have to be in the office or VPN'd in to get access, and then we start to pivot to SaaS when we had the big cloud frenzy. Everything's moving to SaaS applications, which now that's happened. But when that first started happening, you had this concept of shadow IT when the CASB market was just getting started to identify what your user base is using. Like, I don't even know what SaaS applications these people have gone out and signed up for and are using unbeknownst to me. So you have this similar concept in extensions. So this is our management console. And this is where we're going out. So we offer an extension or with the browser, and there's agentic vendors, there's browser extension-based vendors, there's browser vendors. We do a different couple of the modalities. We are getting information around all the extensions that are installed. So everyone in the company, I know all the extensions they have. Also, there's a few different tools where you can go and understand the risk behind the extensions. So like CR Excavator, there's a few of them. They're not very well maintained, and so we just decided to build our own. So 4 times a day, we pull the entire Chrome store, which is over 200,000 extensions. We run it through a rating engine where we determine all sorts of things about the extension, including a risk level. And so you can go in and see on any one of them. The big thing, and what we learned with Cyberhaven, is a lot of these tools have very high level permission. So, and you can see the level of permission that's taken as part of the overall risk score. Once you've then kind of done your shadow extension motion, learned what's going on within the company, you can then go in and build policy around that. And so you could say, like, I might have like 2,000 call center workers, and I'm giving them access to like 4 applications, and then I have like Amazon Connect, or I have some tool that a call center user would work that's extension based. I push those out, and then I don't allow anything else. Or I can say, here's a list of what I have approved, and you can select what you want. Here's the ones I'm specifically denying, or the ones I'm denying based on risk level. So a lot of different ways you can approach that. Or you can see there's this approval workflow, which I think is also a few different vendors are doing. And that's where you request an extension. We hook into various different popular ticketing systems that IT help desk worker could then evaluate it and either approve or not approve. And then the user will get a pop-up saying there's a webhook that goes back, and then they can either they'll get a notification telling them that they can put it in. So this is a way to kind of rein in what's going on with extensions in this case, the Island Enterprise browser, or even with third-party browsers where you're running our extension or other vendors' extension. Okay. A really core thing to compromise credentials is phishing, and then also ways of harvesting passwords using InfoSeCon, which you commonly use, keylogger type of technology. So a couple things I'll show here. Okay. So we use a fun tool that I always get the name wrong, so I wrote it down. Evil Go Fish. Has anyone used Evil Go Fish? This thing's really cool. So Evil Go Fish is an open source project built by, I would assume, terrible people, who, unless you're in the room. If you're in the room, you're great. Where it automates your entire phishing campaign for you. So it builds the emails, it sends them out. It then builds an Nginx transparent proxy, so that it builds it will build a vanity URL on the fly for you, or based on domains that you own. Send it through this transparent. So the traffic's actually going to Microsoft. It's actually going to whatever real website, and you've just stood up this little transparent proxy that grabs the traffic right in the middle, and they've built this beautiful way to automate all of this, right? It's terrifying. We use it quite commonly to test things out. So as one example, this is going through Evil Go Fish. I can clearly customize the messaging. This is and this is also pretty common in the enterprise browser. There's full web categorization. So we have 82 web categories, and then there's all these various different risk levels. So I can make decisions on what I want to do using that as one of the decision points. So here I'm warning the user, I'm coaching them on what not to do or what to do. But I'm going to let them go through anyway. In this case, this is like the absolute, and you can see here, like, this is one of the cool things. If you're an enterprise browser, I control the page, so I've just put a watermark in there, right? I have total control of anything in this page. So I'm on actual GitHub. I'm being put through a transparent proxy for the Evil Go Fish. But in this case, I've decided, based on whatever criteria, that I just want to really lock this down, and I've just put it in read-only mode. So like, this is a suspicious category or uncategorized or whatever it is. And I've just decided, if my users go to this, like, you can look at it, but you can't put anything in, right? So that's kind of the more extreme case. The more common case would be where we use an anti-phishing technique. Similar things happening here, and this is what's terrifying about this tool. Like, this is Microsoft login. I'm just getting transparently proxied on my way there. So this is not like some fake page that I built. Like, this is Microsoft. And so I can put a control in that says where you're allowed to use company credentials. So I can say, if you meet certain criteria, like you're high risk or whatever, you can't use them. Or I can say, for these 20 sites, you can use our company credentials, but for nothing else, right? So completely limit where you're able to put them in. So here, like, if I put in a non-matching site, it would work. But if I then try to go put in my work, should have brought my readers. I'm getting blocked. I did a warn, which is probably not what you do. There's different things you can do here. But it picked up that you're trying to put your company credentials into an untrustworthy site, right? And it's telling me that in this case, you can do it, but click here to allow it. I'd probably just block it if I was actually doing this in the real world. All this is audited, so I can go back in the logs and see exactly what happened, along with screenshots and video if you want, watching the user do it. Okay, so one example of anti-phishing. I'll also go through Keylogger here, which is a lot easier to do on Windows. Sorry for all the Microsoft fans, but it is still a little easier to hack on Windows than it is on a Mac. All right, so I've got Island here, and I've got a pretty simple little keylogger. So this is assuming that someone has some level of access to your machine. And so you can see in the terminal window there, it's grabbing what I'm typing, a bunch of garbage. So now if I were to go to GitHub and go to log in, and I go to type in my username, you can see it's getting that, but then I go to try and type in my password, and I'm typing, but it's not getting anything. So the enterprise browser, without having any sort of, there's no agent on them, it's just this browser, I'm able to get between the scraping methods that keyloggers would use to get at the data that's being entered. All right. MFA enforcement. So on the MFA side, and I mentioned a little bit about it earlier. I think most companies are pushing hard to get MFA on anything, any applications their users are accessing. It is proven to, it's not completely foolproof. There are attack methods, but it does greatly reduce the attack vector. I think most companies have old web applications that don't support MFA. So they're either not integrated into your authentication, your IDP, where your MFA is being triggered. So like you have a wireless access controller from the late 90s that is like TACACS only or whatever it is and does not support MFA, right? So with the enterprise browser, the other thing is that since you have total control of the content of the page, I can insert MFA onto either page load. So I'll just show. I think it's this one. This is one of our policy engines, so you can see it's like these firewall style rules. So who go into what, all the various different types of actions that I would want to take on it. One of those is session and network controls. So like if you're in the coffee shop and you walk away from your machine and you want it to hit a 30-second timer, then lock the browser. Like there's all these types of session controls you can put in. But also you can see here, I can put in MFA on page load or in a configured action. So like I had a customer who in AWS, when their developers are working in there, when there was one section where you could delete, I forget what it was. They wanted, when they hit that button, they wanted to get an MFA pop. So even not just on the page, but individual, like you click on a form field, anything that you could trigger off of in the page, any action, you can then pop MFA. So it's whether when you go to that wireless access controller web page, when you hit submit, it can pop the MFA at that point. So all these types of controls. So enterprise browser is interesting in it allows companies where there's this gap, they have certain applications that they cannot do MFA on, and it's not allowing them to finish up their MFA project. This can close the gap on the last few of those. Okay. Zero knowledge privilege access management. So for us, PAM is inserting credentials where the user can never get access to them. The general PAM market's a little different if I look at like CyberArk or a vendor like that. But the key here is I am preventing the user from ever actually getting the credentials. So I'm allowing them to log in, but never actually giving them the credentials. So as one example, come back into my home page here. In this case, I'll go into Salesforce. I have an IDP integrated this page. Sorry, yeah, you'll see this weird watermark. We have like 10 different watermarks we put in with various different levels of getting in your face. So here you can see this is giving me the option to insert these credentials. So there's a central admin, or you can give it to a user. They can push out creds to users or groups or whatever. And it gets inserted, but you'll see like the eyeballs missing. The normal ways that you would expose the password, they're gone. I can come in and I can try to get to DevTools. That's been revoked. All the typical methods that a user would try to go in and harvest those credentials have been taken away. So the downstream effect of that is I can push these credentials out to a user. They never have access to them, so they can only access this application in the enterprise browser. They can't go to Chrome or Edge because they don't have the credentials, right? So it's a way to share credentials out to users in a very secure way that they then can't get access to. It actually goes, well, I'll talk about that in a second. I don't want to steal my 0.9 thunder. Okay. Browser enforcement. So a natural question with enterprise browser is, well, can't the user just use another browser, right? So then just get around all these controls I have. So when we first started, this was a really early focus for us, is how do we do what we call browser enforcement? So you have to use the browsers that I'm dictating that you're using. And for some customers, that's a non-issue. You have a very locked down environment, and so you're able to dictate that. But if you're giving access to a contractor or BYOD, and it's an unmanaged device that you have no control over, how do I enforce that you're using this tool so that I can put in all these other features that I'm talking about and make sure that everything is secure? So I'll just give you one example. It's one of the few times you'll see me use Chrome. All right, sorry. Okay, so this, I know it's hard to tell, they're very similar, but this is Chrome. And so let's say that I go to Office, right? And I go to log in. And by the way, Chuck Nolan is another Easter egg, if anyone knows who Chuck Nolan is. I guess Easter eggs I'm not supposed to tell you, but sorry. This is our password manager. All right. And I can't get in, right? So there's various different mechanisms for this. For us, it's either source IP based, which can either be shared or dedicated to a customer, or cert based, which is actually, it's interesting. There's zero need to access the user cert store. We're actually pushing the cert on the fly as created by Entra or Okta or other vendors, and pushing it on the fly during this process out to the user into their browser. And so then we're doing cert-based, the cert is being served up by their IDP, and then we're pushing it out to the user on the fly, and then that's how you're doing the enforcement. So then on conditional access in Entra or the equivalent in Okta or various other vendors, I can build a rule that says these users or groups going to these applications have to use our enterprise browser. If you want to go look at the weather or you want to go to your personal banking, you can use whatever browser you want, right? I don't care. So it's a way to very selectively enforce on the applications that you want to focus in on the use of these tools. We do have this delightful hammer that is a service that just doesn't let any other browser run, and it gives you this nice message telling you to use Island. So there's a bunch of different ways we do it. This is probably the most common because it provides a lot of flexibility around who you're applying it to and which applications you're applying it to. Dark web credential monitoring. There's a bunch of sensitive data in here, so I don't want to show that. So I just took a screenshot and blurred a bunch of stuff out. We're partnered up with the leading dark web data vendor. There's various different vendors in the space. And so built into the product, we are seeing, since we're the browser, we see all the logins. So I know who's logging in, I know what they're logging into. So then we can cross-correlate that with these dark web services where you can see here, I can see the user, I can see the URLs where their credentials were harvested from, and then I can see the breach source. And so now I have a much better view and understanding what my risk level is with these users and take action accordingly. Ooh, that's right, I'm still in PowerPoint. Okay. IP pinning and session protection. So Not sure why these aren't two separate points, but IP pinning also, if anyone goes back in the time machine to where you would say, when SaaS first started rolling out, I only want you accessing our Office 365 if you're coming in from the office or your VPN in the office. So I'm going to restrict that if you're going to access Office 365, it's from these IPs only. And so then we had to do split tunneling and all these sorts of things to help address that. We now have that construct in enterprise browsers. So I can, for specific applications, I can say I'm going to send this through an edge service that is going to transform their source IP to either a set of shared ones, or most customers will do dedicated so they know it's their users only. And then I can reference that. So it's a way of saying you can access Office 365 from the office, or if you're using Island, right, or whatever enterprise browser is providing this kind of service. So it's an interesting way for the SaaS applications that allow for this, and most of the large ones do have some sort of IP source limitations. It's a way to enforce, again, only users coming in on these types of tools are allowed in. Session protection, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of issues with Chrome Password Manager, and if you just go grab Chrome Pass, it is trivial to get the passwords out. But there's also issues with cookies and local storage and cache and all these things. So the other motion that most enterprise browsers you'll hear talk about is locking down those vectors, so encrypting the cookies. So even if you have local access, the cookies are useless because they're stored in an encrypted format that you can't use to do session replay or whatever else. So a common set of tooling. So for example, this Nearsoft is a great one. Like, he has a huge set of tools. Great one. I mean, like they're not nice tools in a lot of ways. But like if I come in here, this is every single cookie I have in Chrome, right? It's just pulled it right out, no problem. So it is absolutely trivial to pull this out of standard Chromium browsers using easy to find tools. And so what you'll see in the enterprise browser space is an effort to really lock these things down. And then the last one I'll talk about here is inline password transformation. So this is an interesting thing about this new architecture. If I think about password managers, which are great tools, I use them for my personal life, so I can share passwords with my kids so they don't nag me every 5 seconds to get whatever password. There is a gap there, right? Like, even if I'm using the extension or the external application, I am copying that password. That password is then going into memory or the clipboard buffer. And then I am then pasting that into the web page. And then that web page, as I showed you, typically you'd have DevTools access so that you can pull that data out. So there's this gap between what's storing your password and where you're inserting it. When you're the browser and you've built the password tooling into the browser itself, that gap is no longer there. And then even when you paste the password into the browser, if you pull up DevTools, like if you were to get DevTools access, or if you're able to sniff, you're able to hook the application and sniff it, it is not the password that gets pasted. It's a token. And then since we also control the network stack in the browser, we don't inject the actual password until it hits the wire. And so then your only exposure point is man in the middle. So if someone's SSL decrypting your connection, which we also have man in the middle protection that detects untrusted issuer and various other type of typical SSL issues, and then you can either block that or you could audit it if you wanted to. I don't know why you'd want to do that. So all the different gaps there of where you're moving that sensitive data, enterprise browser, since it owns all of it, all the way down to the network stack, is able to close those gaps. All right. So I talked a bunch about logging, and this is near and dear to my heart. Is anyone here involved in your SOC, incident response, looking at logs? Okay, cool, good. Why am I clicking around so much? Here we go. All right. So this is, I think, and also an interesting thing just in general in the enterprise browser space is anyone who works in the SOC, you get a lot of logs, and a lot of those logs are not very valuable. So more logs is typically considered better, but if you're pulling logs from endpoint with event viewer type data, or like if you're pulling it from a web proxy or a next gen firewall, and the scenario that I described before, did this person actually put their credentials in and hit submit? Like, do I actually have a problem, right? If I'm a SOC analyst, I go into my SIM and it's like, okay, I can see they went to the page. There's 500 HTTP put post gets, 200, 300, 400, and I have no idea what happened. Like, I can see they went to the page. I see a bunch of stuff went back and like, was this post them doing it? Like, I'm not sure. Like, and what level of visibility do I have into that payload? I don't have any visibility to the payload now, so then I got to start hopping around tools. So what we've done, and I think is taken the view of what's going on from how the user is interacting with the page. Where are they navigating to? What did they click on? What did they type in? Where did they get redirected to? All this. So if you look at the way we're gathering logs, it's this the motions that they're taking going around. So if I, for example, this is the phishing site. I have a bunch of data here, but if I come in and look, in this case I did a screenshot, I can see where I went, and I have a red circle to show where I clicked, right? Then next, I came in and I navigated, and then I typed something in. So here I can again see exactly where I was, and then I can see exactly what I typed in. Right? So now as a SOC analyst, if I'm trying to figure out if someone got phished, I can see you went to this page, you typed in your username, you typed in your password, and you hit submit. And now I got to go open up CrowdStrike, and the rest of your day is ruined. I have to completely remediate everything or get your laptop from you and take whatever action. Or you didn't, and we're good, right? So it's this level of visibility that you're getting because you're at the interaction point exactly where the user is interacting with those applications. You get really interesting data that would be much harder to piece together in other ways as a SOC analyst. And a lot of the work that I've done is, so we've integrated with all the major SIM vendors, so you don't have to interact with it in our interface. You can go interact with it on your own tooling. Okay. All right, so let me go ahead and wrap things up. So I do want to make sure, what I would not want is for you to walk away from this thinking that the enterprise browser space is good for preventing credential theft and nothing else, right? Like, to me, it's it's kind of table stakes. So we work with 7 of the top 10 banks in the US. We work with 2 of the 3 top banks in the UK. We have been pen tested to death very thoroughly. And so these are things that we're getting tested on, and you have to do, right? And that allows you to then help address all these interesting use cases like contractor access, like BYOD, like being the company's standard browser because it allows you to provide a higher level of security around key applications. All these types of and there's a whole set of use cases. But providing this high level of security and knowing that the sensitive data of your users, especially credentials, are very locked down is kind of a core requirement and not so much a use case. The other interesting thing about enterprise browser and in the cybersecurity world, we're kind of always thinking about what can we block and stop the bad stuff, but it's also very much an improvement to the end user experience and the way that like end user compute or the application side of the business can have a much better end user experience, and that you also have total control over all the messaging to those users. So if they do something unsafe, you can message that in a nice way. You can move them in a certain direction. If you need to do acceptable use, you can insert that into the flow. And all the various different customizations I showed you, like that, it's a way for the business to be able to nicely communicate and guide the user and provide this really nice user experience. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out, give you guys back 3 minutes so you can have a little break before moving on to the next thing. Thank you very much. Hopefully this was informative for you. Please stop by. I'd love to meet everybody in the room. Come by the booth and say hi. We can get LinkedIn connected and all that kind of fun stuff. And if you want to learn about Island, would love to go over it with you. So thank you.